real stories of werewolves, of Dogman from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
Werewolf and a torn-up wife-beater. Dear Scary Stories NYC, there's a werewolf in my neighborhood, and he seems to find me interesting. I do not mean a dogman. I mean a werewolf. I know he's a man who changes, because he is always wearing clothing when I see him. This is a muscle-bound freak of a werewolf, with arms like cannons, and a chest too wide to throw your arms around. He's either wearing a torn wife-beater or no shirt at all, but on bottom I'll see torn jeans. I bet he's muscular even when he's human, but he is clearly much larger in his Wolfman form. His clothing is always torn away, just like Lou Ferrigno's on the old Hulk TV show from the 70s and 80s. I've never seen him transform, and I have no idea who he is when he's human. I wonder if he's someone I know. Maybe one of my neighbors. I see him standing on my block in the dark when I come home from Walmart in the middle of the night. I like to shop late, when the crowds are thinner. But lately I've been too scared to carry everything in once I get home. This last time I went shopping, I put all the frozen and refrigerated items into 2 bags, and I ran inside with those, leaving the rest of the food overnight in the car until the morning. I didn't even see the creature that night, but I know how silent he is, and how he can be hiding just anywhere. So I admit I am scared to have this creature in my neighborhood, and I do find it unnerving to look out my window and find that he's already been looking in at me before I even realized it. I don't even know how he finds time to feed himself. He seems to spend all night just spying on me. I am a middle-aged woman, and I lost my husband back in 2020. I live alone here, and I don't have too many friends who still live in this town. Having a steroided-out muscle man interested in me is hard not to be flattered by, but I try to remind myself that he might just want to eat me for dinner. I am a bit on the overweight side. Maybe he thinks I'd be a nice meal. I keep trying to tell myself that's all there is to it, but I find myself looking into the beastman's eyes for longer than I mean to. He always runs away after I spot him, but not right away. He tends to stick around and look back into my eyes for a while, before he runs off. It's almost like he's trying to leave a message for me in my mind, but I can never understand what that message might be. If only I could comprehend his message for me. My brother tells me I need to move away from here. He says I should pick a city and move to it, so that I can meet new people. He says it's the loneliness that's making me think that a wolfman is stalking me. But he doesn't understand. He's never seen the creature. I had an idea recently. I could maybe become a door-to-door sales lady. Then I would have an excuse to ring the doorbells of all my neighbors, one by one. Then I could look to see if any of them might like to wear wife-beater undershirts. If he's interested in me when he's a wolf, maybe he'd also be interested in me when he's a human. Maybe we could make a life together. Sometimes when I see him as I come home, he makes a point of standing under the light. He seems to want me to see him. He seems to want me to know he's there. This is why my brother thinks I'm losing my mind. But I'm not. The werewolf really is trying to get me to pay attention to him. But how can I? There is no safe way to be near him. I need to go inside when I see him. I need to get myself safe. He's more animal than man from what I can see. And yet, once I get inside, I turn and stare back out at him through the window. Even when I'm running away from him, I'm still drawn to him. I need to find his human alter ego. I need to figure out who he really is. Because if I don't, then sooner or later I'm going to weaken, and I'm going to walk out there in the night when the creature stares in at me. He's going to beckon, and I'm going to join him. But when I do, he might just destroy me to satisfy his hunger and then leave me forever. He might not feel any of the things for me that I think I'm beginning to feel for him. He might even be hypnotizing me when he stares at me. Maybe he wants me to feel love for him so that I would give in to him willingly. Maybe to him, I'm just prey. I suppose my brother is right. I can't think straight, and I should probably move to a more populated location. But I find I can't take my mind off of the werewolf in the torn-up wife-beater. Story number 1. Fury of the Werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC, we had a werewolf problem our first year when we moved into our second farm when I was a kid. I don't want to get into personal family details because they are embarrassing, but we lost our larger farm, and we were lucky to have gotten our hands on this smaller and more rural farm. If we hadn't, we would have had to move to a rental apartment and get minimum wage jobs, since we had no training in anything other than farm work. In those days, it was just me, Dad, and Mom. This was a few years before I met Gloria and started my own family. I forget if I was 18 or 19, but I was done with school and working full-time with Dad on the farm. We always set out to do the work of a full team of men, even though it was only the two of us. When it's your own family farm, you're willing to do whatever you have to do. After losing our first farm, we were grateful to have to get up before dawn and get back to work each morning. We were deathly afraid of losing that second and smaller farm, the three of us. And we didn't really get secure financially until Gloria came along later, bringing a wave of good luck with her. My late mom used to love her and called her Gloria in Excelsis Deo, which, I don't know, I guess it was an old song or something. I know she meant it as a compliment. When we were there the first few months of that first year, people from the area kept asking us how our werewolf was doing, and if we had seen the werewolf yet. We would laugh and say, yeah, sure we saw the werewolf, because we thought we were being hazed as the newcomers to the region. That is, until one day when Mom came running out to the field to tell us that she had seen the werewolf, and had bluff charged her, sending her running back to the house. She told us it was hairy, and stood on two legs like a man, but it was too large to be a man. She named this guy from our last church that was really tall, who used to work as a wrestler and a bouncer, and then she said that the werewolf, well, he was taller than that guy. I remember I kept looking from Mom to Dad to Mom to Dad, hoping that this was some kind of a joke. Dad looked more and more worried as she told her tale, though. I hadn't seen that look on Dad's face since we lost the last farm. I felt so angry that this was happening to us. A werewolf trying to kill my mother? Really? I was getting a persecution complex, like the entire universe thought it was funny to mess up our lives for some reason. I was a teenager, though, so it was kind of my job to feel persecuted, I guess. Dad and I headed over to where Mom had her encounter. We saw where the creature had walked from, and we saw the direction he was heading to, before Mom interrupted him in his journey. Dad pointed out that he was heading into our land, from an area whose owner we weren't ever sure of. It might have been public land, but we never looked into finding out, and there were no signs posted that we could see. The two of us set about figuring out how we could fence off that pathway into our farm. Let the Dogman go play on that unmarked land. That was fine with us. Just don't come on our land and scare my mom. It wasn't 2 more days before we had a fence and a gate with a lock, just like as if we were living in the city. Only we weren't afraid of criminals. We were afraid of the Dogman. Soon after, the second incident happened. This was the big one, where all 3 of us saw the beast. Our chicken coop was just around the back of the house, and we could all hear them getting upset, like if a fox happened by or something like that. Then we could shout out the window to scare the varmint off, or go downstairs and chase it off if need be. Well, the night in question here, we all woke up to the sound of that Dogman throwing an absolute temper tantrum, screaming, bellowing, roaring, and tearing our chicken coop to shreds. We all ran down there in time to see the chickens all over the yard, with the coop being torn down by this huge lunatic. At first, to me, it looked like a man wearing a furry mask and furry pants. But then I saw that his forearms were furry as well. I'm trying to say that this creature had a lot of bald spots, and a few hairy ones, where you could see his skin. It looked basically, sort of Caucasian, or at least I would say lighter toned. If this was a werewolf, he might have been Asian, Hispanic, Arab, or white, as his skin was like a light-skinned man with a deep tan, you might say. But I don't think it was a werewolf. I think it was some kind of a wild animal. A dogman, in other words, but a very humanoid-looking one. I have seen images online of bears with mange, and I can't understand how they might get confused with dogman in brief sightings from a distance when they're standing on their hind legs. I really do. But this creature literally tore our henhouse apart with his claws or hands or whatever they were. He was far too strong to have mange. Mom was right in that it stood taller than any man I had ever seen. Everything she said had described it accurately. I had kind of been hoping she was exaggerating, to be honest. But sadly, my mom was very honest. Sadly in this case, I mean. We were facing a really big and really violent problem. Dad fired his rifle once into the air to get the creature's attention, and he succeeded. The dogman responded by turning around and firing one of the chickens, like a fastball, into Dad's belly, knocking him over backward. I picked up Dad's weapon where it lay, and I began firing directly at that varmint, wrecking our property. I could have sworn I hit it multiple times, but it never reacted as though I had. It just sort of ran and jumped out of sight in a few moves, and then it was gone. The next morning, as the men showed up that Daddy had called to come help us fix the chicken coop, they told us that the fence around the front of our property, which they had just helped us install days earlier, was already torn up out of the ground. We had all set the poles in concrete embedded deep into the rocky ground, and yet, somehow, several of the posts had been ripped up out of the dirt, and the entire fence was knocked over. How the hell do you tear a metal pole up out of concrete in the ground? I mean, you don't. You'd need some kind of heavy equipment for that. But we saw no tracks from a big Caterpillar truck over there or anything like that. Plus, after seeing what he did to our chicken coop, we kind of knew exactly who had done this to our fence. So it seems that this creature did not appreciate our attempt to force him to choose another walking route at night. We decided to take the rest of the fencing down since it wasn't going to be allowed to stand anyway, and we just worked on fixing the chicken coop instead. Mom continued to see the dogman near the spot she had originally seen him, but she avoided him each time and he didn't chase her anymore. We begged her to stop taking that path, since there were other options, but she was a very single-minded woman. Dad and I sort of eventually noticed that she stopped talking about the werewolf. When Dad brought it up over dinner one time, she told us she hadn't seen the creature in a long while. It was one of those things. She didn't even notice he was gone. She always just operated assuming he might be nearby. All three of us had altered our lives because of that beastman. We all carried bear spray with us at all times, for instance. And we kept doing that sort of thing for probably over a year after Mom's last sighting. It took us a long time before we started feeling normal again. Before life felt normal again. But it eventually did. The dogman found some other path to walk, and our business improved to the point where we were able to rise back up out of poverty. You naturally become stronger people after you survive. The Fury of the Werewolf. Story number 2. Full Moon Werewolf. Dear Scary Stories NYC, here's a kind of an odd one for you. I saw a dogman twice, or at least I saw something that looked like a dogman. I'll tell you what happened, then you can decide for yourself what that thing actually was. The first sighting was in Holy Rosary Cemetery, which is just north of Johnsonburg, PA. As any young man growing up in Johnsonburg will tell you, they named the place after us men who lived there. If you catch my drift, ladies. That was sort of the sense of humor my bunch of guys in those days had, when I was around 20 years old. And yet, for some reason, we still had girlfriends anyway. I guess that was the golden era of dating or something. Of course, we always had weird girlfriends. They always claimed to be Wiccan priestesses and all that, but still, we did have girlfriends. I think women were more patient back then or something, I don't know. So me and my two dork friends were hanging with these three young women who were way too pretty to be dating us, but simultaneously way too crazy to be out of a mental hospital. The group of us used to hang in the woods at the very edge of a cemetery to get the vibe of the evening and smoke each other out. If we boys didn't see any security, and if the girls didn't detect any bad anti-Wicca vibes or whatever, then we go out and sit around this really creepy, sad statue of this hippie guy nailed to a cross while people were crying. These girls claimed they disliked Christianity, but when it was as creepy as this statue of life-sized crying people, well, they loved it. You know, they have fixed the security holes that used to exist at that cemetery, so I want to advise you not to do what we did. The place is very well kept up these days, and nothing like this could happen in current year. But this didn't happen now. It happened way back then. Sometimes on the trippier nights, I would think I was seeing those creepy Jesus statues move, or at least one of them at a time. It would feel like they would move out of place when you would turn to look at them, and then they would get back in place quickly. We were always partying over there though, so we couldn't be sure we weren't just seeing things. But this event I'm about to describe to you was something we all saw, and we all ran away from. So I'm pretty certain this was not an optical illusion. We were sitting around Jesus and the Sad People and chilling when my buddy's girlfriend started whispering in my girlfriend's ear. I asked them what was up, and the two of them started squinting and pointing out over the tombstones to the other side of the graveyard. I joined them in squinting, and soon I saw something that both confused and frightened me. There was this really big guy running like a maniac toward us. And I mean like a maniac. I wondered if it was someone we knew, but the closer it got, the more confused I got. Whoever that was seemed to be wearing a monster mask. No, an entire monster costume. I was thinking how hot he must be running in that costume, when the light of the full moon showed me that was not a man in a costume. I didn't know what it was, but it was alive, and that was its own real fur. We realized this seemed to be a Dogman racing at us, and suddenly it wasn't just the girls that were screaming as we each ran off in a different direction, away from that religious statue. My girlfriend and I ran to the edge of the woods and peeked out from behind a tree. One of my friends was hiding behind a tombstone, but we were all sort of braced for impact, if you know what I mean. Not everyone got a clear view of this, but my girlfriend and I watched that monster man, who had a distinctly canine head, race right past the statue of the life-size Jesus on the cross, and into the woods behind the cemetery. Once it was gone, it was like all six of us went ape. We were all hooting and hollering and jumping up and down, like we had just seen a touchdown run or something. I guess we were dumb kids, but that was quite a show we got to witness on that night. So that was why we went back the next night, armed this time with cameras of various kinds. We didn't have good cameras on cell phones yet. This was back around the turn of the century, so I'm talking about us bringing Kodachrome kind of stuff, from snapshot cameras to a Canon professional camera that my friend had, and one big VHS video camera that weighed a stupid amount. We all went to the cemetery each night for the next week, waiting for the Dogman, determined to capture evidence this time. Then we did the same the week after, but the girls were growing restless. By the third week of waiting for Doggo, everyone was starting to get cranky. We no longer were just enjoying each other's company and chilling. We were so uptight about finding proof of the Dogman that we had seen so unexpectedly that first night. By the time a month had passed, even my girlfriend was sick of the entire thing. I argued that we should give it one final shot, since it was the 1-month anniversary, and the moon would be out full, making it brighter and easier to get a good photograph. Nobody cared, though. Everyone was worn out, and I was, along with the rest of them. I stayed home that night instead, actually crashing out of bed a lot earlier than usual. I remember waking up around, midnight or 1, and I looked outside my bedroom window. Well, don't you know I saw him? I saw the Dogman, the same one from that night in the cemetery, or else his identical cousin from the Patty Duke show. He was doing the same thing as last time I saw him, tear-assing across the grass, running like he just stole somebody's hubcap. I ran around my room looking for my little black Kodak camera. Then I remembered I'd left it downstairs and I ran down to fish it out of my jacket pocket in the front hallway. Then I remember racing out the front of the house in the night in my underpants, running around looking for the Dogman. I ran completely around the house and my socks got soaking wet from the dew on the grass, or maybe it had just rained, I don't remember. I just remember running around the house one final time before accepting that wherever the Dogman was, he was long gone. I pulled off my wet socks and I walked around to the front of the house in my underpants, feeling very defeated. Then I saw that the front door had swung shut and locked, and I realized I had no key in my underpants, and that I was locked out there in the night with the Dogman. So I walked around the house one more time, this time checking the other doors and windows to see if maybe I could sneak back in through one of them. I eventually got my fingers under one of the looser dining room windows, and I was trying to push it up, but I found it was half locked. So then I found myself jiggling the window and trying to get the lock to open itself up. I got pretty intensely into what I was doing, and the entire world faded away. I needed to get back in that house before the Dogman came back. I was starting to shake in panic. It was beginning to get to me. So then I looked up, and I saw a terrifyingly angry face glaring back at me. No, it wasn't a reflection of the Dogman standing behind me. It was my father inside the house, wondering why I was trying to break one of his expensive windows. He made a motion toward the front door, and I marched back around, feeling extra stupid, like I was about to be in trouble. When I reached the door, my father's hand came out and grabbed me, dragging me inside roughly. "Get in here, you idiot! Do you want the neighbors to think you're a flasher?" I tried to explain what had happened, but somehow insisting that I saw the Michigan Dogman running through our yard in Pennsylvania, so I locked myself out of the house in my underpants, didn't sound as intelligent when I said it as it had sounded in my head when I thought it. Yes, anyway, the point of all this that we missed at the time was that both my sightings were on the night of the full moon. So maybe this wasn't even a Dogman at all. I mean, what if this was a werewolf? Like a man who changes into a Dogman when the full moon is out. It would make more sense, right? So my girlfriend told me she believed me, but my other friends did not, and I was unable to use this event to revive our stakeout nights at the cemetery. Plus they beefed up their security at night, and that stopped being such a cool place to hang. And so I never again had any more chances to see the full moon werewolf. You can find no one finer than Sabrina. She's the finest person that we've never seen her. Please join me in thanking the great and immortal Sabrina Midkiff, who made a very generous donation to us during the brief 36 to 48 hours that we were recently and mysteriously demonetized. This donation was huge to us, not only in practical terms as we didn't know if we would have money for food, but it also felt awesome to know that somebody actually cared. I can't tell you how much that mattered in that moment, I really can't. And I can't thank Sabrina Midkiff enough for her kindness and generosity. And now, from the sublime to the ridiculous, Henry. Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.